The Sword of Legends. The alien sun burned low over the crystalline plains of Altharis V, its orange light scattering across an endless sea of jagged spires that shimmered like fractured rainbows. The air crackled faintly with energy, as if the planet itself was alive, humming with secrets long buried. Calder stepped carefully along the narrow ridge, his black stealth suit blending seamlessly into the sharp terrain. His dark hair was damp with sweat, but his sharp green eyes betrayed no weariness. "This place feels wrong," Ian muttered, more to himself than to his companion. From behind, a soft, lilting voice responded, carrying an edge of teasing amusement. "That's because you're human. Always so quick to think something's wrong when it's just unfamiliar." Ian glanced back, smirking at his guide, Thalyn, a tall, violet-skinned alien with striking gold markings across her face. Her braided silver hair glinted in the light, and her golden eyes were as sharp as the blade she carried at her hip. Thalyn was Exhivian, a species renowned for their physical prowess and unshakable calm. She had accompanied Ian on countless missions, and her knack for navigating hostile alien worlds had saved his life more times than he could count. "Maybe you Civians just have a higher tolerance for creepy alien energy," Ian shot back, adjusting the strap on his gear pack. Thalyn's laughter was soft, like the chime of distant bells. "Or maybe humans just have a talent for making everything dramatic. The artifact's signature is strong here. Keep up." They continued their ascent, scaling jagged cliffs that offered breathtaking views of the valley below. Strange crystalline formations jutted up from the ground, some towering hundreds of feet, others pulsing faintly with inner light. It felt like the planet itself was watching them, waiting for something to happen. Then Ian saw it. At the peak of the ridge, embedded in a block of obsidian that seemed to devour the sunlight around it, was the sword. Its blade gleamed faintly, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic light, like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. Strange runes ran along the hilt, glowing faintly in patterns that seemed to shift as Ian stared. "That's it," Thalyn said quietly, her voice losing its usual playful tone. For Exhivian to show reverence was rare, and it made Ian's stomach tighten. As they approached, Ian felt a strange pull in his chest, as if the sword was calling to him. "What's the story here?" he asked, glancing at Thalyn. She shrugged, her expression unreadable. "The sword predates any known civilization. Every species that's found it has tried to claim it, but it won't budge. Not even with advanced tech or brute force. Some say it's a relic of the precursors. Others think it's a weapon of judgment. Either way, no one's been able to lift it." Ian moved closer, unable to tear his gaze from the blade. The glow seemed to intensify as he approached, casting faint blue light across his face. "Maybe they've just been going about it wrong," he muttered, reaching out. Thalyn grabbed his arm. "Are you serious? The greatest minds in the galaxy have failed, and you think you can just waltz up and—" Ian ignored her, pulling his arm free. His hand hovered over the hilt for a moment, the air crackling faintly against his skin. Then, with a deep breath, he wrapped his fingers around it. The world erupted in light. Electric blue energy surged along the blade, shooting outward in arcs that lit up the entire ridge. The obsidian block cracked, splitting apart with a deafening rumble. Ian staggered back, the sword now fully in his grasp. The blade's glow pulsed in time with his heartbeat, filling the air with a low hum. Thalyn's wide eyes reflected the sword's light. "What did you just do?" Ian looked at her, then back at the weapon in his hand. It felt impossibly light, as if it had been waiting for him all along. "I think I activated it." Before Thalyn could respond, a low, mechanical whine filled the air. Ian's gaze snapped to the horizon, where a squadron of black, insect-like drones was approaching fast. "Great," Thalyn growled, drawing her blade. "You triggered something, and now the whole planet knows we're here." Ian tightened his grip on the sword, feeling its power thrumming through him. "Then we'd better move. Fast." With the sword's glow lighting their path, they plunged into the crystalline maze below, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them, awakening the past. The crystalline maze was a labyrinth of glowing spires and jagged pathways, each turn reflecting the pulsating blue light of the sword Ian now carried. The hum of the weapon seemed to resonate with the terrain itself, like an ancient language only the planet understood. Behind them, the whine of the drones grew louder, their metallic bodies slicing through the air like black daggers. "Any bright ideas, Calder?" Thalyn called, her voice steady despite the urgency in her steps. Ian adjusted his grip on the sword, its energy pulsing through him like a second heartbeat. "You're the navigator. Isn't getting out of mazes your thing?" Thalyn smirked, casting a quick glance over her shoulder. "Not mazes that glow and seem to shift every time we move. This planet is alive, or at least its energy field is." She pointed ahead. "We're heading for higher ground. It'll give us a better view." Ian followed her lead, feeling the weight of the sword's power in his hand. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something more, something that carried the weight of history. His mind flashed back to the moment he touched it, to the visions that flooded his thoughts. Towering ships, ancient warriors, and a war that seemed too massive to comprehend. It wasn't just a sword. It was a key. "What's with the face?" Thalyn asked as they climbed a steep incline, her keen eyes catching his distracted expression. Ian hesitated. "When I touched the sword, I saw things. Ships, battles, something huge. It felt like humanity's past." Thalyn's golden eyes narrowed as she processed his words. "You're saying this sword is connected to your species?" "Not just connected," Ian said, the conviction in his voice surprising even himself. "It's part of who we're supposed to be." Thalyn was quiet for a moment, her gaze flicking to the sword. "Then you'd better hope those drones don't get their claws on it. Whatever secrets that thing holds, someone clearly doesn't want us finding them." As if on cue, a sharp buzz cut through the air. Ian barely had time to react before a drone swooped down, its sleek black body gleaming as it fired a bolt of energy in their direction. Ian dove to the side, rolling into a crouch as the blast scorched the ground where he just stood. "Keep moving," Thalyn shouted, slicing her blade through the air as another drone descended. Her movements were precise and deadly, the alien steel of her weapon cutting through the drone's armor with a sharp crack. Ian sprinted after her, the sword's energy surging as if responding to the threat. Without thinking, he swung it toward an approaching drone. A pulse of blue light shot from the blade, striking the drone midair and sending it spiraling into the ground in a fiery explosion. Thalyn turned, her eyes wide. "Did you just?" "I don't know," Ian admitted, his breathing ragged. "It just happened." "Then make it happen again," Thalyn said, grabbing his arm and pulling him forward. "We're not out of this yet." The drones were relentless, their numbers growing with each passing minute. Ian and Thalyn darted through the maze, weaving between glowing spires and narrow passageways. The sword's energy seemed to guide Ian's movements, pulling him toward paths that avoided the worst of the onslaught. Finally, they reached a plateau overlooking the crystalline valley. The view was breathtaking, a sea of glowing formations stretching as far as the eye could see. But Ian had little time to admire it. The drones were closing in, their black forms swarming like a cloud of locusts. "This isn't sustainable," Thalyn said, her voice tight as she scanned their surroundings. "We need a plan." Ian looked down at the sword, its glow steady and strong. "I think this thing might be the plan." Thalyn raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know how it works." "Neither did the first person who invented fire," Ian shot back. He stepped to the edge of the plateau, raising the sword high. The energy within it pulsed, growing brighter as Ian focused. The hum became a roar, and the blade seemed to extend, its light carving through the darkening sky. The drones hesitated, their formation breaking as if sensing the surge of power. Ian swung the sword in an arc, and a shockwave of blue energy erupted from the blade, sweeping across the valley. The drones closest to them disintegrated instantly, their bodies crumbling into ash. The others retreated, their mechanical whine fading into the distance. Ian lowered the sword, his arms trembling from the effort. Okay, that was new. Thalyn stared at him, a mixture of awe and disbelief on her face. You just wiped out a fleet of drones with a single swing. Ian gave a breathless laugh. Yeah, but I don't think I can do that again, anytime soon. Before Thalyn could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. The crystalline formations in the valley began to shift, their glow intensifying. Ian's grip tightened on the sword as a deep, resonant hum filled the air, a sound that seemed to come from the planet itself. What now? Ian muttered. Thalyn's eyes widened as she pointed toward the valley. Look. In the center of the formations, a massive structure was rising, its surface glinting like polished obsidian. It was a pyramid, its apex reaching high into the sky, as ancient symbols began to glow along its edges. Ian felt a chill run down his spine. I think we just woke something up. Thalyn's hand went to her blade as she stepped closer to Ian. Whatever it is, we'd better hope it's on our side. The pyramid loomed, its shadow stretching across the valley. Ian could feel the sword vibrating in his hand, its energy resonating with the structure as if they were two parts of the same whole. He glanced at Thalyn, his jaw set. This isn't just about us anymore, he said. Whatever's down there, it's tied to humanity's past, and it's going to change everything. Thalyn nodded, her golden eyes fierce. Then let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. Together, they descended toward the rising structure, the sword's glow lighting their path. The heart of the pyramid. Ian and Thalyn moved cautiously toward the newly emerged pyramid. The structure loomed like a sleeping giant, its polished obsidian surface reflecting the faint glow of the surrounding crystals. The air grew thick with energy, making every breath feel charged with electricity. The sword in Ian's hand pulsed rhythmically, its glow synchronized with the glyphs now lighting up across the pyramid's surface. Each step toward it seemed to deepen the connection, as though the artifact was pulling him closer to something it wanted him to see. Do you feel that? Ian asked, his voice low as they approached the base of the structure. Thalyn nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. It's alive. Or at least it's aware. This isn't just some ancient ruin. It's a construct with a purpose. The pyramid's entrance was a massive archway that shimmered with an otherworldly light, its surface rippling like liquid silver. Ian hesitated for a moment, staring at the strange portal. Any guesses what's waiting for us inside? He asked. Thalyn smirked, though her golden eyes were wary. Nothing good, if we're lucky. Ian couldn't help but chuckle as he stepped forward, the sword's glow intensifying as he crossed the threshold. Thalyn followed close behind, her sharp gaze sweeping the surroundings for threats. The interior of the pyramid was vast and eerily quiet, the walls lined with the same glowing glyphs that covered the outside. The floor beneath their feet hummed faintly, as though the entire structure was a living, breathing entity. The sword's light seemed to guide them, illuminating the path ahead with a soft, steady glow. Whatever this place is, Ian said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, it's ancient, older than anything I've ever seen. Thalyn crouched to examine the floor, running her fingers over the seamless material. This isn't metal or stone. It's something else entirely. And these symbols, she gestured to the glowing glyphs, they're similar to the ones on the sword. This whole structure is connected to it. Ian's gaze drifted to the glyphs, their patterns shifting as he moved closer. He felt a strange pull in his chest, as though the sword was calling out to whatever was hidden within the pyramid. Let's keep moving, he said, gripping the sword tightly. I don't think this place is going to wait for us to figure it out. They followed the glowing path deeper into the pyramid, the air growing colder with each step. The hum of the walls grew louder, resonating in Ian's bones. He could feel the sword reacting to the energy, its glow becoming more intense with every passing moment. Finally, they reached a massive chamber at the heart of the pyramid. In its center stood a pedestal, and atop it rested a spherical object that pulsed with a light so bright it was almost blinding. The sphere seemed to be made of the same material as the sword, its surface etched with the same ancient glyphs. "This is it," Ian said, stepping forward. "This is what the sword was leading us to." Thalyn grabbed his arm, her expression tense. "Be careful. We don't know what that thing is, or what it can do." Ian nodded, his heart pounding as he approached the pedestal. The sword's glow grew brighter with each step, its hum resonating with the sphere until the two seemed to be singing the same song. When he reached the pedestal, Ian hesitated. The sphere's light was mesmerizing, and he could feel its energy pulling at him, urging him to reach out. Taking a deep breath, he placed the sword on the pedestal. The reaction was immediate. The glyphs on the sword and the sphere flared to life, their light filling the chamber with a blinding brilliance. Ian stumbled back as the pedestal began to shift, the sphere rising into the air and hovering above the sword. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in a language Ian didn't understand, but somehow he knew exactly what it was saying. Guardian recognized. Humanity's legacy restored. "What is that?" Thalyn asked, shielding her eyes from the light. "I think." Ian hesitated, the words sinking in. "I think it's a recording, or maybe an AI. It's tied to the sword and the pyramid." The sphere pulsed again, its voice continuing. Images filled the chamber, projected from the glyphs on the walls. Ian and Thalyn watched in stunned silence as a story unfolded before them. Massive starships, their designs ancient but unmistakably human, patrolled a galaxy teeming with life. Humanity was shown as a guiding force, helping other species rise and thrive. But then, the images darkened and shadows crept across the stars. Massive rifts tore through the fabric of space, releasing entities of pure darkness. The final image froze on a fleet of human ships standing against the encroaching void, their weapons blazing as they fought to seal the rifts. The voice spoke again, its tone grave. "The void returns. The guardians must rise once more." Ian stared at the projection, his mind racing. "The void, it's real, and it's coming back." Thalyn stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "What does that mean for us?" The sphere began to descend, its light dimming as it returned to the pedestal. The glyphs on the walls faded, leaving only the soft glow of the sword to illuminate the chamber. Ian turned to Thalyn, his jaw set. "It means this isn't just a relic. It's a weapon, a tool, and it's our job to figure out how to use it." Before Thalyn could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. The hum of the walls grew louder, and the chamber was filled with the sound of grinding stone. "We've overstayed our welcome," Thalyn said, drawing her blade. "Time to go." Ian grabbed the sword and followed her as the chamber began to collapse. They raced through the corridors, the walls shaking around them. The pyramid seemed to be coming alive, its ancient systems reacting to their presence. As they reached the entrance, Ian glanced back at the heart of the pyramid. The sword in his hand pulsed faintly, as if reluctant to leave. "We'll be back," Ian muttered, more to himself than to the weapon. With one final push, they escaped the collapsing structure, the ground quaking beneath their feet. When they reached a safe distance, Ian turned to see the pyramid sinking back into the earth, its surface glowing faintly as it disappeared from view. Thalyn placed a hand on his shoulder, her golden eyes serious. "Whatever this is, Ian, it's only the beginning." Ian nodded, gripping the sword tightly. "And we're going to finish it." The gathering storm. The sinking pyramid left an eerie silence in its wake, broken only by the faint hum of the sword in Ian's hand. The glowing spires of the crystalline valley seemed dimmer now, as if the planet itself was conserving energy after the pyramid's brief reawakening. Ian wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart still racing. "That was intense." Thalyn nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade as her golden eyes scanned the horizon. "Intense doesn't cover it. Whatever we just uncovered, it's not staying a secret for long. Ian frowned, following her gaze. You think someone's already on their way? Thalyn gave a short laugh, devoid of humor. Ian, we lit up the planet with a beacon brighter than a supernova. Every scavenger, pirate, and power-hungry bureaucrat in the sector probably has their sensors locked on this place. We need to move now. The urgency in her voice spurred Ian into action. Together, they retraced their steps through the crystalline maze, their pace quick but cautious. The sword's glow was faint now, as if it had spent much of its energy in the pyramid. Ian couldn't help but wonder if it was resting. Do you think it's alive? Ian asked, glancing at the weapon in his hand. Thalyn raised an eyebrow. The sword. Yeah. Ian adjusted his grip, the smooth hilt warm against his palm. It feels aware, like it's guiding me. Thalyn's expression softened. Artifacts like this aren't just tools. They're creations of a civilization far beyond what we understand. Maybe it's not alive in the way we think, but it's definitely connected to something bigger. Ian nodded, her words sinking in. He didn't fully understand the sword or the visions it had shown him. But one thing was clear. It wasn't just an ancient relic. It was a key to something far greater than himself. As they reached the ridge overlooking the valley, a low hum cut through the air. Ian and Thalyn froze, their eyes scanning the horizon. A fleet of sleek black ships was descending, their shapes sharp and menacing against the orange sky. Ian's stomach tightened. Looks like the party's already started, he muttered. Thalyn's lips pressed into a thin line. Those are Federation enforcement vessels. They're here for the sword. Ian glanced at her. Any chance they'll let us leave peacefully? Thalyn shook her head, her silver braid swaying. Not a chance. The Federation doesn't negotiate when it comes to artifacts of this magnitude. They'll take it, and anyone who gets in their way won't live to tell the tale. Ian sighed, his grip tightening on the sword. Great. So what's the plan? Thalyn's eyes sparkled with determination. We make it to my ship. It's fast enough to outrun them, but we'll need to stay ahead long enough to plot a jump. Ian glanced at the approaching ships, his jaw set. Lead the way. The descent to Thalyn's hidden ship was a frantic dash through uneven terrain. The sound of approaching engines grew louder, the Federation's fleet closing in. Ian could feel the sword pulsing faintly in his hand, its energy building as if responding to the threat. Finally, they reached the ravine where Thalyn's ship was hidden. The sleek, silver vessel was compact, but powerful, its design optimized for speed and stealth. Thalyn quickly keyed in a code, and the ship's ramp descended with a hiss. Get in, she ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ian sprinted up the ramp, the sword's glow lighting the way. Thalyn followed, slamming the controls to seal a hatch as the first Federation ship appeared overhead. The ship roared to life as Thalyn took the pilot's seat, her fingers flying across the controls. Strap in, Calder. This is going to be rough. Ian dropped into the co-pilot's seat, securing himself as the ship lifted off. The view from the cockpit was both breathtaking and terrifying. The crystalline valley bathed in fiery light as the Federation ships began their assault. They're locking on, Ian warned, watching the tactical display on the console. Not for long, Thalyn replied, her voice calm and focused. She pulled the ship into a sharp climb, weaving through the incoming fire with precision that left Ian both impressed and slightly nauseated. The sword pulsed in his lap, drawing his attention. Ian stared at it, his mind racing. The visions from the pyramid, the voice calling him a guardian, it all pointed to one conclusion. Thalyn, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. We can't just run. Thalyn shot him a sharp look. What are you talking about? This sword, it's not just a relic. It's a weapon. A warning. The Federation can't have it, but we can't keep it hidden either. If the void is coming back, we need to be ready. Thalyn's hands tightened on the controls, her golden eyes narrowing. "And you think taking on an entire fleet is the way to do that?" Ian met her gaze, determination etched into his features. "We don't have to fight them all, just enough to show them what this thing can do." Thalyn hesitated, her mind clearly racing. Finally, she sighed, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You're insane, Calder, but I'll give you this. You've got guts." She flipped a switch, and the ship's weapons powered up. "You've got one shot, hero. Make it count." Ian stood, the sword pulsing in his grip as he moved to the center of the ship. The energy within it was building, resonating with the ship's systems. He closed his eyes, focusing on the weapon, letting its power flow through him. When he opened them, the sword blazed with a brilliant blue light. "Let's do this," he said, his voice steady. Thalyn smirked, pulling the ship into a dive toward the incoming fleet. "Show me what you've got, Guardian." The battle was about to begin. The Guardian's resolve. The ship dove toward the Federation fleet, the sleek silver hull cutting through the atmosphere like a blade. Ian stood in the ship's central compartment, gripping the glowing sword as its energy pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Thalyn's voice crackled through the comm system, steady and focused. "They've locked onto us. Multiple targeting systems. You'd better have a plan, Calder." Ian closed his eyes, letting the hum of the sword fill his mind. The visions from the pyramid flashed before him. Human ships standing against the void, their weapons blazing with the same energy that now coursed through his hands. He didn't fully understand the sword's power, but he knew one thing: it wasn't just a weapon. It was a message. "I'll buy us some time," Ian said, his voice calm despite the chaos outside. Thalyn's response was sharp. "What do you mean, buy us time?" Ian stepped toward the rear airlock, the sword glowing brighter with each step. "Open the hatch when I tell you." "Are you out of your mind?" Thalyn's voice rose with incredulity. "We're in a live combat zone, and you want me to." "Trust me," Ian interrupted, his tone firm. "You said it yourself. This sword is more than just a relic. It's time we show them what it can do." Thalyn muttered something under her breath, but Ian could hear the faint hiss of the airlock preparing to open. He braced himself, gripping the sword tightly as the hum of its energy intensified. "Opening in 3, Thalyn said. "Don't die, Calder." The airlock hissed open, and Ian stepped into the void. The roar of the atmosphere was deafening, the wind tearing at his suit as he stood on the edge of the ship. Below, the crystalline valley stretched out like an alien tapestry, while above, the Federation fleet loomed, their weapons primed and ready. Ian raised the sword, its blue light cutting through the chaos. The energy surged, radiating outward in a wave that seemed to ripple through the air itself. For a moment, everything was still. Then the first blast came. A Federation ship fired, its beam of energy slicing through the atmosphere toward Ian. The sword pulsed in response, and Ian swung it instinctively. The beam struck the blade, shattering into harmless particles that dissipated in the air. Ian felt the power of the sword coursing through him, guiding his movements as more ships opened fire. With each attack, Ian deflected the beams, the sword's energy creating a shield of light that enveloped him. The Federation ships faltered, their formation breaking as confusion spread among their ranks. Inside the cockpit, Thalyn watched in stunned silence. The tactical display showed the energy signatures emanating from Ian and the sword, a level of power she'd never seen before. "By the stars," she muttered, her golden eyes wide. "He's actually doing it." Outside, Ian's focus sharpened. The sword wasn't just a shield, it was a conduit. He could feel its power building, waiting for him to release it. As another wave of ships closed in, Ian raised the blade high. The energy surged, erupting in a blinding wave of blue light that swept across the sky. Federation ships were thrown off course, their systems overwhelmed by the sheer force of the blast. The valley below lit up like a second sun, the crystalline formations reflecting the sword's glow in dazzling patterns. When the light faded, The Federation fleet had retreated, their ships scattering into the distance. The air was still, the hum of the sword softening as Ian lowered it, his body trembling from the effort. Thalyn's voice crackled through his calm. "You're insane, Calder. Completely insane." Ian grinned, his breath ragged. "But it worked, didn't it?" "It worked," Thalyn admitted. "Now get back inside before I change my mind about saving your reckless hide." Ian stepped back into the airlock, the hatch sealing behind him. He collapsed onto the floor, the sword resting across his lap. Thalyn appeared moments later, her expression a mix of exasperation and awe. "You just took on an entire Federation fleet with a glowing sword," she said, crossing her arms. "I don't know whether to be impressed or terrified." Ian gave a weak laugh. "Why not both?" Thalyn shook her head, but her lips curved into a small smile. "You're lucky I like you, Calder. Otherwise, I'd have left you out there." Ian met her gaze, his voice soft. "Thanks for not giving up on me." For a moment, the tension between them eased, the weight of their situation replaced by a quiet understanding. Then Thalyn's expression turned serious. "That was just the beginning," she said, nodding toward the tactical display. "The Federation will regroup. And next time, they won't hold back. We need to get out of here." Ian stood, his legs still unsteady. "Where do we go?" Thalyn's golden eyes met his, her voice resolute. "To the one place they'll never expect us to go. The heart of the Crimson Nebula." Ian frowned. "The Crimson Nebula. That place is a death trap." Thalyn's smirk returned, full of mischief. "Exactly. Which is why it's the perfect place to hide." Ian sighed, gripping the sword tightly. "You're crazy." "Coming from you," Thalyn said, taking her seat at the controls. "I'll take that as a compliment." As the ship lifted off, Ian stared out the viewport, the crystalline valley fading into the distance. The sword in his hand pulsed faintly, as if reminding him that their journey was far from over. "Whatever's out there," Ian murmured, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We'll be ready." The ship disappeared into the sky, leaving the ruins of the pyramid and the Federation's reach behind. But Ian knew this was only the beginning. The void was coming, and with it, a fight that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Into the Crimson Nebula. The ship hurtled toward the Crimson Nebula, its sleek frame cutting through the inky void of space. The nebula loomed ahead, a swirling vortex of blood-red gas and crackling energy storms. The sight was both mesmerizing and foreboding, its turbulent beauty hiding countless dangers. Ian stood at the cockpit viewport, the sword resting against his shoulder. Its glow was faint but steady, as if saving its energy for what lay ahead. Behind him, Thalyn worked the controls, her movements precise and confident. "Do you really think the Federation won't follow us here?" Ian asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. Thalyn shot him a glance, her golden eyes gleaming with determination. "They might try, but even their best pilots don't venture into the nebula lightly. The storms mess with sensors and navigation systems. One wrong move, and their ships will be torn apart." Ian frowned, watching as the nebula grew closer. "And we're supposed to survive this." Thalyn smirked, her confidence unwavering. "Relax, Calder. I know the safe routes. As long as you don't do anything stupid, we'll make it." Ian muttered under his breath, gripping the edge of the console as the ship entered the outer edges of the nebula. The turbulence hit them immediately, the ship shuddering as it passed through the roiling clouds of gas. Lightning crackled around them, illuminating the cockpit in flashes of red and gold. Thalyn's hands flew across the controls, her jaw set in concentration. "Stay focused," she muttered, more to herself than to Ian. "The path is narrow, but it's there." Ian kept his eyes on the viewport, the chaotic beauty of the nebula pulling at his thoughts. "You've done this before, haven't you?" "Once," Thalyn admitted, her tone casual despite the danger. "But that time, I wasn't being chased by half the galaxy." Ian gave a dry laugh. "Comforting." The sword in his hand pulsed faintly, drawing his attention. Its glow intensified as they moved deeper into the nebula, the light cutting through the dense red haze like a beacon. "It's reacting to something," Ian said, holding the sword up. Thalyn glanced at it, her expression thoughtful. "The energy fields in the nebula are ancient. They might be connected to whatever powers that thing." The ship jolted suddenly, a blast of turbulence throwing Ian off balance. He caught himself against the console, his grip on the sword tightening. "Hold on," Thalyn shouted, wrestling with the controls as the ship veered sharply to avoid a swirling vortex of gas. "The storms are worse than I remember." Ian steadied himself, his gaze fixed on the viewport. Through the chaos, he spotted a faint glimmer of light ahead, its blue glow standing out against the crimson storm. "Thalyn, do you see that?" he asked, pointing toward the light. Thalyn followed his gaze, her brow furrowing. "What is that?" "I don't know," Ian admitted, the sword pulsing stronger now. "But I think it's why we're here." Thalyn hesitated for only a moment before adjusting their course. "All right, Calder. Let's see where this leads." The ship moved toward the light, the turbulence growing fiercer with every passing second. Ian could feel the sword's energy building, resonating with the mysterious glow ahead. It was as if the nebula itself was alive, guiding them toward something hidden within its depths. As they drew closer, the light resolved into a structure, an enormous station floating within the heart of the nebula. Its design was ancient, its surface covered in the same glyphs that adorned the sword. The station pulsed with blue energy, its light cutting through the surrounding storm. "That's precursor tech," Thalyn said, her voice filled with awe. "It's been here for centuries, maybe millennia." Ian stared at the station, his heart racing. "The sword led us here. This is what it wanted us to find." Thalyn brought the ship in for a cautious approach, her hand steady on the controls. "Let's hope it's not a trap." The docking sequence was smooth, the ship settling into a bay that seemed to activate automatically. As the ramp descended, Ian and Thalyn stepped out, their surroundings bathed in the station's ethereal blue light. The air was eerily still, the hum of ancient energy filling the space. "This place feels alive," Thalyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ian nodded, the sword glowing brighter in his hand. "It's like the pyramid, but on a much larger scale." They moved cautiously through the station, the glowing glyphs lighting their path. The architecture was unlike anything Ian had ever seen. Massive corridors and sweeping arches that seemed to defy gravity. It was both beautiful and unsettling. Finally, they reached a central chamber, its walls covered in intricate patterns of light. At its center stood a massive console, its surface pulsing with energy. The sword's glow intensified as Ian approached, the hum of its power resonating with the console. "This is it," Ian said, placing the sword on the console. The reaction was immediate. The chamber came alive with light, the glyphs on the walls shifting and pulsing in rhythm with the sword. A holographic projection appeared above the console, depicting a vast galaxy surrounded by dark tendrils that seemed to creep ever closer. "The void," Ian whispered, recognizing the shadowy forms from his visions. The hologram shifted, showing fleets of ships, human and alien alike, standing together against the encroaching darkness. The voice from the pyramid echoed through the chamber, its tone grave. "Guardians of the galaxy, your time has come." The void rises once more. Ian and Thalyn exchanged a glance, the weight of the message sinking in. Whatever the sword had awakened, it wasn't just a warning. It was a call to action. "This is bigger than us," Thalyn said, her voice steady. "If the void is coming back, we can't fight it alone." Ian nodded, gripping the sword tightly. "Then we find allies. We rally whoever we can." Humanity's legacy wasn't just about power, it was about unity. The hologram shifted again, highlighting locations across the galaxy. Ian recognized one of them immediately. The site of the last battle from his visions. "That's our next stop," he said, determination burning in his eyes. Whatever's there, it's the key to stopping the void. Thalyn smirked, her confidence unshaken. Then let's get moving, Guardian. The galaxy isn't going to save itself. With the station's secrets now fueling their resolve, they returned to the ship. As they prepared to leave, Ian couldn't help but glance back at the station one last time. Let's hope we're ready for what's coming, he muttered. Thalyn grinned, firing up the engines. We'll figure it out. We always do. The ship disappeared into the storm, carrying the sword and humanity's hope toward the next chapter of their journey. The final stand. The ship emerged from the Crimson Nebula, its silver hull glinting against the backdrop of distant stars. Ian sat in the co-pilot's seat, the sword resting across his lap. Its glow was steady now, a quiet reminder of the power it held and the responsibility it carried. Thalyn adjusted the controls, her golden eyes scanning the tactical display as they approached their destination. Before them lay a desolate planet, its surface scarred by ancient battles. The atmosphere shimmered faintly, an eerie reminder of the war that had once raged here. Ian recognized it from his visions, the final battlefield of humanity's first war against the void. This is it, Ian said, his voice low. The last stand. Thalyn gave a short nod, her expression serious. And now it's the first line of defense. Let's hope we're not too late. As the ship descended, Ian could feel the sword's energy intensify. It wasn't just guiding him. It was urging him forward, as though it knew the urgency of their mission. The landing was smooth, the ship settling on a plateau overlooking a vast canyon. At its center stood a towering structure, its design unmistakably precursor. The glyphs along its surface glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the sword. Ian and Thalyn stepped onto the rocky ground, the air heavy with the weight of the past. The sword's glow lit their path as they approached the structure, its towering form casting long shadows in the fading light. This place feels wrong, Thalyn muttered, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. Ian nodded, his grip tightening on the sword. It's not just the past. Something's here. As if on cue, the air around them shimmered, and dark tendrils began to emerge from the ground. They twisted and writhed, their shapes unnatural and otherworldly. Ian's stomach tightened as he recognized the entities from his visions, the void. They're already here, he said, raising the sword. Its light flared, pushing back the encroaching darkness. Thalyn drew her blade, her stance steady. Looks like we're making a stand. The tendrils lashed out, their movements quick and unpredictable. Ian swung the sword, its energy slicing through the darkness with ease. Each strike sent shockwaves rippling through the air, the weapon's power acting as a barrier against the void's advance. Thalyn moved with precision, her blade cutting through the tendrils as she fought alongside Ian. Despite the chaos, there was a strange harmony to their movements, as though they were two parts of a single force. We can't keep this up forever, Thalyn shouted, deflecting an attack. Ian glanced at the structure ahead, its glyphs glowing brighter with each passing moment. We don't have to. The sword brought us here for a reason. We just need to reach the core. Together, they pushed forward, the sword's energy carving a path through the darkness. The tendrils grew thicker and more aggressive, their attacks relentless. But Ian and Thalyn fought on, their determination unwavering. Finally, they reached the entrance to the structure. The glyphs along its surface flared to life as Ian approached, the sword's glow resonating with the ancient symbols. The door opened with a low rumble, revealing a chamber filled with pulsating light. This is it, Ian said, stepping inside. The air was thick with energy, the hum of the sword blending with the resonance of the chamber. At the center of the room stood a massive console, its surface covered in intricate glyphs. Ian placed the sword on the console, and the reaction was immediate. The chamber erupted with light, the glyphs shifting and pulsing in complex patterns. The voice from the pyramid echoed through the chamber, its tone both commanding and urgent. Final activation sequence initiated. Guardians confirmed. The fleet awakens. Outside, the ground trembled as massive structures began to rise from the canyon below. Ancient starships emerged, their designs sleek and powerful. The fleet Ian had seen in his visions was coming to life, their engines roaring as they prepared for battle. Thalyn stared in awe, her golden eyes wide. "You did it, Calder. You woke the fleet." Ian nodded, his heart pounding. "Now we just need to use it." The sword's glow intensified, and Ian felt its energy flow through him. He could see the fleet's systems, their weapons primed and ready. The void was spreading, but now they had the means to fight back. As the first wave of void entities emerged from the shadows, the fleet responded. Massive energy beams lit up the sky, cutting through the darkness with precision. The battle had begun, and humanity's legacy was once again at the forefront. Thalyn stepped closer to Ian, her expression fierce. "What now?" Ian met her gaze, determination burning in his eyes. Now we finish what they started. Together, they took their place at the helm of the flagship, the sword's energy guiding their every move. The Void's forces were relentless, but the fleet stood strong, its power fueled by the unity of its guardians. As the battle raged on, Ian couldn't help but think of the message the sword had shown him. Humanity's true strength wasn't just its technology or power. It was its ability to unite, to inspire, and to protect. And as the fleet pushed back the darkness, Ian knew one thing for certain: the galaxy's future was worth fighting for.